So we're on Parshas Vayechi on 268 and 269, the last parsha in the book of Bereshis, and it's the ending. We have the end of the forefathers here. Yaakov it passes away. Of course, Avram and Yitzchak did before. So it begins by telling us Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esrei Shana, and it says that Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. Right? Then it says Vayehi Yemei Yaakov, and the days of it was the days of Yaakov Shnei Chayav Sheva Shanim V'Arba'im U'Me'ah Shana, and it says that the years of his life were 147 years. So you see the difference in the wording. It's odd. First it says Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt for Sheva Esrei Shana, 17 years. Okay. Then it says, and it was at the days of Yaakov were 100, right? Sheva Shani V'Arba, right, for 147 years. But it doesn't. It says the days of Yaakov. First it says he lived 17 years. Then it says the days of Yaakov were 147 years. So what does it mean? Why is it telling you days? Right? If I'd say, how old are you? Oh, I'm 10 years old. You don't tell me you're 3,650 days old. Or you don't say, how old are you? Well, I'm days and 10 years. But why are they telling you anything about days? Right? It's switching from days to years. So you don't use both expressions together. You could say he lived 20 years and 7 days, but they don't say that. He said he was 17 years in Egypt, and his days were 147 years. They used to say he was 147 years old, and that his days were. So the commentaries tell us many different things about this, but one of the things I found that was very interesting, that's very pertinent to our lives, is that when a person like Yaakov lives 147 years old, right? In order for a person to have a life with meaning, right, that person has to have that they try to accomplish things, right? Most of us, when we look at somebody who accomplished something in their life, we look at one or two great things that happened. Sometimes when you have a person like we call a hero in the newspaper, it's a person who something happens to and they react correctly. They're walking down the street and they happen to walk by a fire and they act correctly. They help somebody, right? So they're a hero. They're not people who are prepared necessarily to be heroes. They happen to walk by. Right? They could be doing absolutely nothing with their entire life, and you see this happen, where a person can do absolutely nothing their entire life, and suddenly they do this and they're a hero, then they go back to doing nothing. What he's saying here is that Yaakov Avinu was a great person. He was a person who, here we are all these thousands of years later, and we're speaking about him. We learn from him, we live because of him, we do so many things because of him, and he lived so long ago. And that's because the accomplishments that he made, even in the difficult life he had, are things that we learn from today. How does a person accomplish so much? So it says that a person, of course, he lives 147 years. During that period of time, he accomplished a lot. But the way he accomplished a lot was that every single day was significant. Every day was important. There wasn't a day where he said, I'm not going to do anything. Or the idea is that a human being's job is to do things. That's what we do in this world. That's why I said before that if you look at the words in Hebrew for heaven and earth. So heaven is Shemayim and earth is Aretz. So Aretz, meaning land or earth, is very funny because it's there's nothing as stable and as that sort of stays where it is as land. Land doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't do anything. But the root word for the word Aretz is ratz, to run. So land, the root word for the word in Hebrew for land is run. Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And the word for heaven, where in heaven everything's moving, you think it's you got all the spiritual things moving, and you've got up in the air the birds and the airplanes, everything's moving, nothing stands still. You're going to fall out if you stand still. That's Shemayim. Shemayim comes from the word sham, there, which means it's there, it's not moving, it's right there. Wherever it is where it is. So you said, well, what is that telling us? What it's telling you is not a description of land in heaven. It's telling you the purpose of land in heaven. The purpose of the land is for you to run, do things, accomplish things, make the world a better place, improve yourself, help other people. That's what it's for. It's for running. When we die, we don't run anymore. We're done. Then when we die, we go to Shemayim. There, wherever we are spiritually, that's where we're going to be. While we're in this world, we can change things, we can change ourselves, we can grow spiritually, we can accomplish things, we can become closer to God. But after we die, it's finished. So here it's rots, here it's running. There in heaven, it's there. So when it describes Yaakov, it tells you, Yaakov, of course we know, has lived 147 years. But who was Yaakov? Yaakov was a person who every day of his life, of the 147 years, was productive. He always wanted to accomplish something. He always did. Now, we have to understand, of course, there is a place for rest. There is a place for vacations. But your life is not to be a vacation. Sometimes we know people who, sadly, they don't really do much with their lives. For whatever reason, they don't have to work. They inherited money, or somehow they have money, they don't have to work. And you see that often these people have a low self-esteem. They don't think much of themselves because they don't accomplish anything themselves. They're living off their parents' money. And a 50-year-old man who lives off his parents' money, it affects him. It makes him feel insecure because he doesn't do it himself. Right? Those people, right, who live like that, they're taking vacations all the time. They're always on vacation, right? Because their life is like a vacation. When you then you have other people who work very hard, who do things all the time, but in order to rejuvenate themselves, they need a vacation. They need to go away. So that's fine. You take off a week, you take off 10 days, you take off 2 weeks to be able to rejuvenate yourself so that you can do more. But you don't take off time so that you can do nothing. You take off time to do more. Because the purpose of life is to accomplish. We learn in the first parts of the Torah that Hashem created the world. He created the world, but He didn't finish the job. He wants us to finish the job. That's what they call Tikkun Olam, which is literally it means to fix the world. But in our case, it doesn't mean to fix. Hashem didn't break it. Hashem just didn't complete it. He wants us to finish it. So He tells the human beings, go out and conquer the world. Go civilize the world. It's wild now. Go out there and civilize it. So that's our job. So our job is to do things. So when it tells us in this pasuk that Yaakov lived 147 years, and then it refers to days, it's not telling you just how old he is. It's telling you how did he accomplish what he accomplished in 147 years. And that's because every day of those 147 years, he was doing things. He was working. He was accomplishing. He was growing. And that's why he became who he was, which is a good lesson for us to understand how our lives should be. Our life should be accomplishing as much as we can, even if we need to take breaks, that's fine. And then it says, Vayikra Yemei Yisrael Lemus. So it was time for Yisrael to die. Now you notice now his name's changed. For Yaakov and Yisrael, of course, is the same person. Right? We learned earlier in the Parsha. But here it starts out that says Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt. Then it says, and it became time for Yisrael to die. Why did it switch his name? Like if in the beginning of the sentence Yaakov is the appropriate name, why here one line later is Yisrael the appropriate name? So there's a number of general rules about his names, but one rule that really is the most fundamental one about what name is used for him is that when his name is referred to as Yaakov, it's referring to him as the forefather Yaakov, an individual. He was a person. And he got married, and he had problems and things, and his wife died. Whatever happens in his life, that was Yaakov. Then there's Yisrael, and that means he's the founder of the Jewish nation, because every Jew comes from Yaakov, right? All 12 tribes come from Yaakov. So Yaakov is the ultimate grandfather of the Jewish people. Whenever it refers to him as the founder of the Jewish nation, the eternal Jewish people, then it switches his name to Yisrael. Because now he's the founder of Israel, the founder of the Jewish nation, right? The Jewish nation is referred to as Israel. We're not referred to really as Jacob, we're referred to as Israel. So even though he was the same person, so here it says that Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt. So Yaakov, the person, lived in the land of Egypt. Now it says it is growing close to the time that Yisrael, the founder of the Jewish people, is going to die. So his name changes, because now it's referring to him as the leader and the founder of the Jews. Right, so what does he do? Vayikra lefano, he calls to his son, to Yosef. He calls Yosef, V'yomer, and he tells Yosef, Imna matzasichem beinecha, if this is okay with you, Simna yadcha tachas yorechi, put your hand under my thigh, V'yasisa imadi chesed v'emes, do for me a kindness and a truth. Alna tagrabeni b'mitrayim, do not bury me in Egypt. Now, this is the first thing that Yaakov says to his son Yosef about his dying. He says, I'm going to die soon. He says, I want you to swear to me that you will not bury me in Egypt. We know he wants to be buried in Israel with his father, his grandfather, his mother, his grandmother, with Adam and Eve, and he wants to be buried in Hebron. So he tells him, don't bury me here. Now, one of the questions comes up is, what does it mean, put your hand under my thigh? Put your hand under my thigh and do this. So what he's really saying is that the Torah uses what we call lashon saginor, which means it's subtle. The Torah doesn't necessarily say what it means. Sometimes it says something and you understand what it means. So here he's saying, I want you to take an oath. So how do you take an oath? By touching somebody's thigh. Because you're not really touching his thigh. He's saying, I want you to touch the place on my body where I was circumcised. Because that's a holy place. Circumcision is the one part of the human body where that spot is, God ordains you have to change it. So therefore, if you're going to swear, you swear on the truth of God. So how do you do that? They didn't have a Bible. They didn't have something like they do in court here. He said, put your hand there on where I'm circumcised, and that will be like the Word of God, because God said to do this. But they don't want to say those words in the Torah because it has a bit of there's a modesty issue. So it uses this expression. But you see, Abraham says the same thing to his servant Eliezer a number of weeks ago in the Parsha. He tells him, I need you to go find a wife for my son Yitzchak, but I don't want you to get somebody from around here. I want you to get people from my family, and I want you to swear. And put your hand under my thigh and swear. And he's telling him the same thing, to touch that spot. So it says that he does. I want to be buried with my forefathers. I went down to Egypt, but I want to be buried in their place. And Yosef says, I'll do as you ask. He says, swear to it, and he swears to it. And then Yisrael, Yaakov, lays down, right? It says that he lays by the head of the bed because he's sick. Now, interesting enough, the Talmud tells us that this is the first time in history that somebody gets sick. Up until now, the way that's when somebody died, they were alive, then they died. And the way that you knew they died, it says that they used to do something like they would sneeze. Because back then, there was no such thing as illness. There was no sicknesses, no catching cold, no cancer, no anything. When it's time for a person to die, they just died. They didn't need to get sick. But it says that Yaakov appealed to God to allow him to get sick, and that human beings get sick. So the human beings, when they get sick, they realize they're going to die, and they will then go and they'll do whatever things they need to do before they die. They want to make peace with their family, they want to say blessings, they want to talk to their family. Whatever it is that they want to do before they die, they know they're going to die. Before, people didn't know. They would be perfectly healthy, they would sneeze, and they would be dead. And so Yaakov says, no, I want to have this. And so God causes him to be sick. So he's sick in bed. He's going to die. So he's able to call Yosef and to talk to Yosef. Then he calls all of his sons and he gives them blessings. And so this shows us an idea for us that today, there's a time when we come to the conclusion that this is going to happen to each one of us. There's a certain point where we realize we have a sickness. We're not getting better. Right? The time has come. We're not going to last that much longer. Let's make the most of our time. And the Torah gives us that ability by God making it possible for us to get sick before we die. So that's just as an aside as to what's happening here. So it goes on and it says the first thing he does is he asks Yosef that he wants to give blessings to his children. And the first thing he says is he asks Yosef, bring me your children. I want to bless them first. So before he actually blesses his own sons, he asks Yosef to bring his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to come to see him, so he should bless him. And it begins here in the bottom of the page, and it's a very interesting scene. So let's go through it. And it came to pass after these things that someone said to Yosef, behold, your father is ill. So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. Right? Jacob was told, behold, your son Joseph has come to you. So Yisrael exerted himself and sat up on the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, Kal Shaddai, God, had appeared to me in Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. He said to me, and he goes on with the blessing, and now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before my coming to you in Egypt, shall be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine like Reuben and Shimon. But progeny born to you after them shall be yours. They will be included under the name of their brothers with regard to their inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died on me, and he goes on. So here you have,
That has something to do with the blessing we say, like the father and son.
This is the blessing. This is the actual blessing that you say on Friday night.
Why them?
So we'll see. We'll see why. Okay. So the first thing that he does before he blesses his own children is he goes and he gets he gets Yosef to get his two sons. Now here are his grandsons, and he asks Yosef to bring them so he can bless them. So he goes through this whole story why he's going to bless them, right? And they're there, standing in front of him. And then suddenly in verse 9, look what happens. Then it says, and Joseph says to his father, these are, start with verse 8. Then Yisrael saw Joseph's sons, and he said, who are these? What do you mean, who are these? You just told me to come. I come with my two sons, who you know, and now I walk into the room for you to bless them, and you ask me, who are they? And Joseph said, these are my sons, whom God has given me here. So he says, bring them to me if you please, and I will bless them. Okay, so now Yisrael's eyes were heavy with age. Now you'll notice again, it keeps switching back and forth between Yaakov and Yisrael. Whenever it's speaking about him dying, about him being asking for something, it's always Yaakov. Whenever it's talking about he's going to bless someone, he's going to do something extraordinary, it's Yisrael, because there he's representing the Jewish people. So it says now, like, as it said, Yisrael saw Joseph's sons, and he said, who are these? But Jacob knew who his sons were, because he just talks about it. And it says in verse 3, Jacob. Here it says Yisrael. Now it says, so Joseph says to his father, these are my sons. And he says, bring them to me. Now Yisrael's eyes were heavy with age. He could not see. So he brought them near him, and he kissed them, and he hugged them. So Yosef brings his two sons very close to his father, who's in bed, right, who's having trouble seeing because he's sick. So Yisrael says to Joseph, now his father says to Joseph, I dared not accept the thought that I would see your face, and here God has shown me even your offspring. Yaakov says, I never thought I'd see you again. I was told you're dead. Not only has God blessed me that I can see you, but I'm seeing your children as well. And then it says, Joseph then removed them from his knees, and he prostrated himself. Then Joseph lays down in front of his father. And Joseph takes his two sons. He puts Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right. And he drew them close to him. But right, so he says he put the two children in front of him, right? In front of pretend I'm Yaakov. He brings the two children facing Yaakov, right? And Yaakov's supposed to put his hands on their heads like this. He's supposed to put his right hand on the older son, and his left hand on the younger son, because the right hand is the stronger hand, and the older son is the firstborn. So he puts it like, supposed to put his hand like this. So it says, but Yisrael extended his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head. So what did he do? Instead of going like this, he goes like this. Right? Very odd. Right? You have Yaakov, Yosef puts his two sons in front of his father. He puts the older one on the right side so that the father can put his right hand, and the younger one on the left side so his father can put his left hand. So his father knows, right? And he switches hands. He puts the younger one gets the right hand, and the older one gets the left hand, which is odd. So it says Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him. Right? Joseph thought something's wrong. My father must be insane. Right? He's dying. He's confused. So he supported his father's hand to remove it. So he tries to move his father's hand back like this, physically, right, to do it. So Joseph says to his father, not so, father, for this is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. Do it the right way, not like this. But his father refused, saying, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a great people, and he too will become great. Yet his younger brother shall become greater than he, and his offspring's fame will fill the nations. Right, so he did it on purpose. He switched the hands on purpose, where the younger one got the stronger blessing and the older one. Now, we're going to explain this whole thing, but this is a problem, a serious problem, because you know that Yaakov, he had a favorite son. That was Yosef, right? And you know what happened? Because he favored Yosef, the brothers were jealous, and Yosef was sold, right? So you think Yaakov, who's no dummy, he'd realize you don't favor one of your kids. I favored my one son, and look what they arrested. They had sibling rivalry, and they got rid of him. He thought they killed him. So he would know. So what does he do? Now Yosef, that same son, shows up, and he's got two sons, and he goes and he plays favorites again. He gives his right hand blessing to the younger one, rather than the right hand one to the older one. He changes it. So now he's again playing favorites. Shouldn't he have learned by now that you don't do that? You treat the kids the same. So We'll have to see. So he blessed them that day, saying. So then Yaakov blesses them, and he says what? And he says, if you look here, he says, "B'cha Yevarech Yisrael," and in you, right, shall the Jewish people be blessed. And what does he say? Yesimcha Elohim ka'Ephraim v'Manasseh. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. V'yasim es Ephraim lifnei Manasseh. And he placed Ephraim before Manasseh, even though Ephraim was younger. Right? Now let's stop there for a moment. So this statement, Yasimcha Elohim ka'Ephraim v'Manasseh, is what we say Friday night to our sons. We say that on Yom Kippur, and you have one for your daughters. It's different, but that's what we say to our sons. So let's go through this section, and then we'll understand why he did what he did. So it says that Joseph, right, brings them, he switches hands. Why does he switch hands? He says because the older one will be okay. The younger one, who I'm putting my right hand on, he's actually going to be greater than the older one. So I'm giving him the blessing, which is exactly what happened with him and Esau. When Esau was the older one, he should have gotten the blessing with the right hand, and yet Rivka, Yaakov and Esau's mothers, had him switched, so that Yitzchak gave the bracha for the older one to the younger one, and the younger one for the older one. Right? Same thing that he's doing with Ephraim and Manasseh. So he's saying that he's saying judging him on what his needs were. And then Yosef, who says, no, this is the rule. The older one gets the right hand. Yaakov says, no, not now. So here you see an occasion where Yaakov is actually treating them differently. Now, here's the important point, that whenever there's a rule, there's always an exception to the rule. And there's a rule that if you have kids, you don't favor one kid over the other. It's not right. You'll cause all kinds of problems. However, that's how you deal with the child. When it comes to the education of a child, when it comes to certain aspects of a child, you have to realize that each child is different, that no two are the same. That like, for instance, if you have a car, and you go out, you can buy two types of cars. You can buy a regular car, you can buy a sports car. A regular car is low maintenance. A sports car is high maintenance. You've got to spend more time with the sports car to make it work than with the regular car. You have people who are like that. Some people are high maintenance people. You have to put a lot of effort into having a relationship with them, or to be married to them, or to work with your children. You have some children that are high maintenance and some are low maintenance. Some children are just, you're there for them and you help them, but they're pretty much take care of themselves. You have other ones that you have to be on top of them all the time in order for them to become productive. Right? They're not better, they're not worse, they're different. That's just how they are. Different children need different things. So when it comes to judging how you treat somebody, right, the judgment of that person, of how you act towards them, you can't have a favorite. You can't do that. You have children, you should treat all the children with the same way, so you don't have jealousy. But when it comes to the education of that child, you need to realize that those children are different. Some children need more time, some need less time. Some need a stricter environment, some need a less strict environment. Some are very creative, some are not creative. Some of them need to get up and move, some of them can sit all day. You can't put them all in the same bucket. So what Yaakov is saying is, I realize what happened to me when I went and favored Yosef, because I treated Yosef better, and that was wrong. To treat one son better than any other was wrong. But when it comes to education, to how that child needs in order to become the best he can be, that there is no wrong. Each child is different, and each child needs to be treated differently. So when Yaakov now is blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, he sees what Ephraim needs and what Manasseh needs in order to grow up and be good people. So he switches his hands to express that while normally the oldest son is going to be more aggressive and go out and be the one who does things, in this case it's the younger son who's going to do that. I can see it in his personality. The older son, in the case of Ephraim and Manasseh, for instance, Ephraim sat and learned Torah all the time. He sat with Yaakov, his grandfather, and he learned with him. Right? Manasseh stayed with his father, and while Yosef was the head of the country, he ran the country, Manasseh helped him run the country. So the two of them together, that each had very different jobs. Then Yaakov realized which one needed what. So therefore he reversed the blessings. In that case, that's not bad. Right? In the case of education and needs of the child, that's not bad. So why then do we make a bracha for Ephraim and Manasseh? Right? Like when you bless your children now, on Yom Kippur, on Friday night, whenever if you do this, if you have sons, you say this same line. What's so special about this line? Why don't we tell our children, you know what, you should be like Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Right? That's what you should be like. You don't. So we say Ephraim and Manasseh. Why do we say you should be like Ephraim and Manasseh? Who were they that they should be the ones? I want my son to be like Yaakov. Yaakov was certainly greater. So there's a number of reasons. One thing is, we see here in the words, he says to Yosef, these two children are like mine. They are to me like Shimon and Reuven, which is my own children. The rest of your children after these two will be yours. What's he saying? He's saying that we have an idea in Judaism that says that as time goes on throughout history, people become less and less sophisticated. The world we live in believes that things that are in the past, they were less sophisticated than us. We know more, we understand more, we don't have superstitions. The people, our grandparents, great-grandparents, they don't know what we know. And therefore, we're greater than them. That's what the world thinks. In Judaism, we say it's the opposite. We say the closer they were to creation and the closer they were to the giving of the Torah, the greater those people were and the greater abilities they had. Right? That's how we see the world, which means every generation you have less abilities. So your great-grandparents had a greater spiritual ability than you have, for no other reason than they were closer to that time. They may never have used it, or they may have used it, but they had it. They had that potential. So first thing he's saying is that Ephraim and Manasseh, who are the next generation, they're not me, Yaakov says, they're not my children, they're my grandchildren, but they're so extraordinary, they're like my children. They're on a level higher than their generation. So he's saying that basically Ephraim and Manasseh not only fulfilled their potential, they exceeded their potential. Now, how is that possible? If God gives you a potential that you're going to do a certain amount, how can you do more than God says you're going to do? The point is when it comes to Torah, it comes to chesed, it comes to the positive things of the world, God will give you an amount you should have, but you can always do more. You can always get more and do more because He wants you to have more in a spiritual sense. Like it's sort of like if God says, all right, I'm going to make you a fire. You have this fire outside your house and it's 2 feet high. Then you walk over to the fire and you stick a piece of wood in and you catch that wood on fire and you walk over to the other side and you make another fire. The first fire is no less, right? It's still the same amount. You can take fire away from that fire and it never gets smaller. And that's how spirituality is. You can have so much spirituality is all you're going to get. So you work and you fulfill your potential, but suddenly you can do more. Why? Because spirituality is like fire. You can take and take and take from it, and it never gets smaller. So you can keep doing it. Ephraim and Manasseh were the first that we have recorded who went beyond their potential. They were like the generation before them. And therefore, we bless our children because we want our children to go beyond our potential. That's one of the explanations. The one that I really like, and I find is very meaningful, is that if you look at Jewish history, everybody we have was born in a very, very specific environment. After Abraham's already an adult, every other person who's a part of the Hebrews were raised in a holy place. You can imagine Yitzchak is raised by Abraham and Sarah, right? Yaakov is raised by Yitzchak and Rivka. You're talking about these children being raised in the homes of people who are extraordinarily righteous. So of course there's a very good chance that the children will remain righteous and be righteous, right? Because they're living in that environment. But when Yosef gets sent into Egypt all by himself and he marries a woman and he has children, they have nobody around them. There's no other Jews in the whole country. There's nobody for them to learn from, to gain from. All they have is Yosef. It's not like having an environment. It's like living in, you can be living in like Oshkosh, Washington, or you can be living in Toronto. If you live in Toronto and you raise a Jewish family in Toronto, there's a much greater chance that that family will remain involved because you have everything you need. You have good schools, you have kosher food, you have everything you need here, and it's normal. In this neighborhood, if you don't keep kosher, you have to go out of your way to get meat. That it's much easier to get kosher meat than unkosher meat in this neighborhood. But if you live in Oshkosh, Washington, or you live in Medicine Bow, or whatever it's called, right, Medicine Hat, in these places, you're going to have to really work to get things that you need to keep kosher and to stay Jewish. In our place, you don't. So all of the Jewish children, the children that came from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were raised in an environment of holiness, and they had everything they needed to remain religious, except for Ephraim and Manasseh. They were raised in Egypt, in the depravity of Egypt, where their father came from the Hebrews, and their mother may have, but their environment in their home was okay. But when they went to school and everybody they lived with around them was certainly not okay. They were idol worshippers. They were corrupt, and nevertheless they became out to be great people. So the first two Jewish children born in the diaspora, in the Galut, were Ephraim and Manasseh. So our children are also born in the Galut. And therefore we say to our children, you should be like Ephraim and Manasseh. You're born outside of Israel. You're born outside of the great environment that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob could give their kids. You're born in a time when there is no temple and Jews are living all over the world. That you should be like Ephraim and Manasseh. You should grow up as if you had all that. And be a positive response. That you should grow up to stay observant and care about other people and be a good person, even though you're raised in this place. So when we make that blessing, we're saying to our children, just like Ephraim and Manasseh were raised in an environment that was not a terrific environment, you also are. They were born and raised outside of Israel. You're born and raised outside of Israel, and they became great. You should also become great. That's what we're telling our kids. That's why we use that expression here.
But if you happen to live in Israel in a religious community, do you still do that blessing?
Yeah, they still say the blessing because there's other meanings. Right? Like when I said, there are many different meanings to understand for it, but that's one. Another one is that when Yaakov blessed Ephraim and Manasseh, we just saw that he reversed it, right? The older one, right, suddenly becomes the younger one, right? That's what he does. He switches them, right? But yet you see that they don't fight with each other. Ephraim and Manasseh, you'd think if you were supposed to get the extra blessings because you're the firstborn, and he gives them to your younger brother, you're going to get upset. Right? You're not very happy about that. But you don't see anywhere that Ephraim and Manasseh don't get along. They always got along, and that shows you another reason that they make the bracha. You say to your kids, you should be like Ephraim and Manasseh, even if one of you feels the other one got something that you didn't get, or you feel that this one gets more presence or more attention, and you should be like them and not fight with each other, and respect each other, and realize that when these things happen, it's not because we love one more than the other, it's because he needs it. Right? It's like I said before, you can have one kid you've got to spend 10 hours with in order for that kid to get their homework done. You got another kid you don't have to even talk to, they'll do their homework. So the one who spends 10 hours, does that mean that you're favoring him, you love him? No, you don't love him anymore. It's just that he needs this, right? But the other one sees, look, you're always spending time with my brother. You're always there. You're never with me, because he needs you. You don't need me as much. That's the idea here. Ephraim and Manasseh realized that we're not the same. We're different. We have different needs and different desires and different goals, and therefore we're not going to be jealous of each other. And that's another thing that we wish on our children, that they should not be jealous of each other. And that's why we say that. So even if they're born in Israel, they would say it. So now we have an interesting thing. It says, Jacob calls for his sons, beginning on chapter 49 and 275. And he says, assemble yourselves, and I will tell you what will befall you in the end of days. So now Jacob tells them, all the kids, come together, all my sons, right, the 12 tribes, come together. I'm going to tell you about the coming of the Mashiach. Gather yourselves and listen, sons of Jacob, and listen to Yisrael your father. So you are all sons of Jacob. Now come listen to Yisrael, the founder of the Jewish nation, because the name changed again. And you're going to come and do that. And I'm going to tell you when we're going to be redeemed by the Messiah. And now if you read the whole thing, you see he doesn't do it. He doesn't tell them. Yeah, there's a whole long section here, and he doesn't say it. So the Talmud tells us that Hashem did not want him to tell them when the Mashiach was coming. He was going to tell them. He knew, and he's going to tell them when it's going to come. He didn't want him to. Why did he want to do it? He wanted to because he understood, my children are going to now go into slavery. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to. God told Abraham the Jews are going to become slaves in Egypt. When my children are in Egypt, they're going to become slaves. Jacob realizes that. Right? He understands that they're going to that's going to happen. So he wants to tell them when the Mashiach is coming, so they should realize that there's an end. You're not going to be slaves forever. You're not going to die here. Because people who think that they're never going to get out, they'll become hopeless and they'll fall apart. But if you know you're going to be here for 40 years or 200 years or 1,000 years, whatever it is, and then you'll come out, so you know there's an end. So you'll always have hope. So he wanted to give them that hope. And God said, no, you can't do that. That's not how we do it. He said, rather than doing that, gather them together. And they know they're going into Egypt, but what you do is when you give them blessings about what's going to happen in the land of Israel. So if you'll see in the next section, he gives blessings to each one of his kids. And he talks about things that were only going to happen in Israel. So how could that be? The only way it could be is because they're going to come out of Egypt. So while he couldn't tell them when Mashiach was coming, he was able to tell them, you are coming out. Because he wanted them not to be desperate. He wanted them to know that there's an end to this. So he says, but what he does now is he gathers together all of them. Right? He brings them all together. And then he blesses each one separately. And this is also odd. Because you'd think, if I'm going to bless my 12 sons, I'll bless them one at a time. I'll bring in the oldest till the youngest. The oldest will come first. I'll give him a blessing. He'll go out. The next one will come. What does each one need to hear the blessing of the other for? Right? Why gather them all together and then invite one at a time? Why don't you just invite one at a time and don't gather them together? And at the end, they can all gather together. Right? Because if you gather them together, you're going to think that everybody should have the same blessing. Then they don't. They all have very different ones. So here we learn the concept that I spoke about last Shabbos, which is called unity through diversity, which is the Jewish people need to be unified. Just like when Yaakov is dying and he has his 12 sons around him, they're unified. They're all together. They all care for each other. They love for each other. They want to grow the Jewish nation from them. They know who they are. They know that they are going to get along. So therefore, they're unified. However, he gives each one a blessing separately because he wants that each one should realize that he has strengths and weaknesses that the other one doesn't have. Each one's different. They're diverse. They're unified, but they're different. Because most of the time we think someone who's unified, they're all the same. Right? If all of us like chicken, then we can be unified in our liking chicken. Right? But you like it roasted, and you like it baked, and you like it boiled, and you like it fried. Right? You all like it different, but you all like chicken. It's the same idea. We all have a goal in this world, to bring the world close to God, to bring the people close to God. That's our goal. All of the brothers have that goal. So they're all unified. That's why they're all brought together. But each one has a different way of doing it. No two people have to be the same. We are not robots. Right? That's why when you have things going on, like going on in Israel, where they're trying to force entire cities to act in a specific way, in a uniform way, if what those people are doing is not against the Torah, then it's wrong to try to force them to do everything the same. You should allow people to do things differently. Now, this past Shabbos, when we had the rabbi from the Bayit came to speak, it was a wonderful thing for the city of Thornhill that you can have synagogues that are different from each other. You can have communities within those synagogues which are different from each other, but that they can all be unified as a part of the greater good of the community. And a way of showing it is by the rabbis interacting with each other to show that we can do this. But does it mean then we should only have one shul? Right? We have to be unified. We'll have one shul. We don't need many shuls. No. We have to be diverse. We have to be different. We have to have what we need. Right? And not all of us need a big, majestic, beautiful shul like the Bayit. Some people feel that's very important to have for their prayers, to feel they're a part of something very beautiful and dignified and almost royal. And then other people feel, no, I need what we have here in this shul, a certain warmth, a certain friendliness, a certain desire to grow. It's not that they don't have it, it's that that's not what they stress. And we have also beauty, but not like they do. So we're different, we're diverse. Every place is different, but yet we can all get along. And that's what Yaakov is telling his sons. You all are going to come around my bed because you're all going to get along. But every one of you is different. You're not the same. And you have to celebrate the differences. Not try to hurt the differences. And this is what he does. He goes through all of the blessings. So we'll take a minute to discuss some of the blessings, just so you get an idea. If you look on 277, beginning with verse 5, he says, Shimon and Levi are comrades. So Shimon and Levi, two of the sons, they're comrades. Their weaponry is a stolen craft. Into their conspiracy may my soul not enter. That's not much of a blessing. Right? Shimon and Levi are friends, right? And what do? What is their weapon? It's a stolen craft. That is trickery. And into their conspiracy, the two of them conspiring together, I don't want to be a part of it. With their congregation, do not join. I don't want to be a part of their people. Oh my honor, for in their rage they murdered people, because when they got angry they killed people, and at their whim they hamstrung an ox. And because they chose to, they injured, it says an animal, but it doesn't mean an animal. It means a group of people. It's a symbol. What happened with Shimon and Levi? If you remember, when Dinah, their sister, got kidnapped by Shechem, and he took her and raped her. So she reported back to her brothers that she had been raped. So Shimon and Levi went to the city where he was, and they talked to him, and they said, look, we know you took our sister. Let's make peace, and we'll give you our sister as a wife, and we'll all get along. So he said, okay. He said, but there's one problem. Our belief is you have to be circumcised. If you won't circumcise yourself, we can't do it. So the king wanted Dinah so badly, the prince actually, that he says, okay, I'm going to circumcise myself. I'm going to circumcise all the men of Shechem, of this city where I am, the city-state. All of them, to show you how much I want to marry your sister. So that night, late that day, they all get circumcised. Now, as they're all in pain, Shimon and Levi come in the middle of the night and kill them all, because they took their sister. In other words, they tricked them. They went and said, we want to be friends with you, and you can keep our sister. And they said, you think you can go and rape a Jewish woman? You think you're going to get away with that? And they killed them all. So that's why he says Shimon and Levi are comrades, right? They get along with each other. They're two together. They went to fight. Their weaponry is a stolen craft. What was their real weapon? Was they convinced the people of Shechem, we want to be your friends. Into their conspiracy may we soul not enter. Yaakov says, I don't want to be a part of that. Right? With their congregation, do not join. I don't want to be doing that. Right? But in their rage, they murdered people because they were so upset that their sister was raped. They killed these people. Right? Curses their rage. He curses their anger, for it is intense, and their wrath, for it is harsh. I will separate them within Jacob. And in order to fix this problem, I'm going to separate the children of Shimon from the children of Levi, and I'll disperse them in Israel, and they will be all over the country. So what's he saying? Shimon and Levi did this thing. Ultimately what they did was for the right reason, but it's not necessarily the right thing. And Yaakov was letting them know what they did was wrong. You can't go killing people. Right? Even though they killed them because of a good reason. They took their sister and raped her, they went in and killed everybody. It's still not the way we do things. Nevertheless, you did it. And why? Because you're so emotional. You're very emotional. They had rage, said. There are a lot of emotions. So what does he do? He separates them and disperses them. So the Gemara says that he was telling them that you're going to be the teachers and rabbis of the world. Right? We have a joke, right, that if you're a teacher in a Jewish day school, you see the world, because you're going from job to job to job in different cities. And rabbis also, like rabbis can be in 5 or 6 different cities in their career. They're moving all the time. So that's what he says. I'm going to separate you and disperse you, like the teachers and the rabbis. But I have to ask you, what he's saying here about Shimon and Levi is not so great. I mean, it's not horrible. But then he says, I'm going to, and because of this, I'm going to make you the rabbis. So you want to say, because you're bad guys and you murdered people, you're going to, from now on, all the rabbis in the Jewish world are going to be your children. You're going to be related to you. What do you think about that? So that means rabbis are going to be like the offspring of murderers. That's what he's saying. So it doesn't sound like something we would want. So that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that he was cursing their rage. The fact that they got so angry that they couldn't control themselves. And they went and killed people. So he says that anger has to be controlled. And you know how do you control it? If you become the rabbis and the teachers of the community, it won't be anger, it'll be passion. When you teach a child, you teach a child with passion. When you teach a community and you lead a community, you'll do it with feeling, with passion. You'll care about those people with all of your heart, and those people will care about you. Right? But if you're not like that, if you don't have that emotion, that passion like Shimon and Levi, you won't be successful. So that's what he was saying. So here he takes Shimon and Levi and he goes through the story and he explains that the passion, the feeling that you had, that you wanted to defend your sister, was not a bad thing. It can be bad and it can be good. You can use rage and beat people up. Right? You have people that get so angry that they beat their spouse. Right? That happens. It's a horrible thing. People do that. You can have so much anger in you that you'll beat someone up. You'll hurt someone that you care about. He's saying that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that you have so much passion inside of you that you went and did this. You're using the passion incorrectly. I'm telling you that every character trait that you have can be used for good or for bad. You took this passion and you used it wrong. You murdered people. Take the passion and use it right. Be passionate. Go out, be a rabbi, give speeches passionately. People will respect that. People will be moved by it. You want to be a teacher teaching children? Do it with passion. Make the kids laugh. Make the kids excited. Make them love to learn with you. Use that emotion. So from this we understand that emotions, human emotions, are not good or bad. If I tell you, you're cheap, does that sounds like it's bad? But I could also say you're frugal. You're on an economy. I say, oh, you waste money. Then you waste money. Money means nothing to you. Or I could say you're very generous. It's the same trait. One is in a negative, one's in a positive. Right? The idea is that whatever trait we have to find the balance in the middle, the golden path in the middle of how to use that trait. You want to be nice to your kids, but you also have to be tough on your kids. If you're only nice on your kids, they're not going to come out right. If you're only tough on your kids, they're not going to come out right. You have to have a balance. And you have to have a balance in your marriage. You have to have a balance in your own life. Between every character trait we have is not a good or a bad one. We have character traits of we are generous or we're stingy. So it's not that being generous is good and stingy is bad. Because generous could mean you don't care about money, and stingy could mean you don't have much money. But it's not good or bad. It's the same character trait. You have to find the path in the middle where you are reasonably following through and you're doing it correctly. So that's what we're talking about here. Understand? Okay, on verse 8 it's Judah. Judah, you, your brothers, shall acknowledge you. Your hand will be at your enemy's nape. Your father's sons will prostrate themselves to you. A lion cub is Judah from the prey, my son. You elevated yourself. He crouches, lies down like a lion, and like an awesome lion, who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a scholar from among his descendants, until Shiloh arrives, and his will be an assemblage of nations. So what's he telling Yehuda? He's telling Yehuda, you are royalty. First thing is your royalty. The scepter will not depart. The scepter is the sign of the king. All Jewish kings must come from Yehuda. That's Yehuda's job. You're the king of the Jews. That's what he's telling Yehuda. That's your job. And you will be the one who is in charge as the king. Right? However, he tells them that you have to do this, right? It has to be done in an appropriate way. It's like a lion. Right? He says a lion who's a leader, right? Who will stand up for what's right, right? And do the right things. And that's who Yehuda is supposed to be. And it says that, and then it says that this won't happen until Shiloh arrives. So Shiloh is another expression meaning Mashiach or the temple, and it's saying that he's hinting at the fact that when Mashiach comes, Mashiach will be a relative of Yehuda. He'll come from the tribe of Yehuda.
In Russian translation, it's until it arrives to Shiloh. It says like some correlation with the Shiloh where the
temple was.
Yeah, before. That's why.
Which was at Yosef's. Right. Well, that would make sense because Yehuda is the Mashiach, and there's another Mashiach, the Mashiach of Yosef. They'd come together. Right. There's Mashiach ben David. Right. We know you all have heard of Mashiach ben David. That's the Mashiach. Right. He comes from David. David came from Yehuda. Then you have what's called Mashiach ben Yosef. Right. Mashiach ben Yosef is another Mashiach who will die. And he will be before Mashiach ben David, and his job will be to prepare the world for the Mashiach. And he will go to war, to lead the Jews to war. And it could be that he's already come. We don't know for sure. But that's the idea of the two of them. So to say that he will go to Shiloh, since Shiloh was where Yosef is, it makes sense that the Mashiach of David will come to see the Mashiach of Yosef, because they would work together. Right? Let's see another one. Another interesting one of the blessings, if you look at number 14 for Yisachar. So Yisachar is a strong-boned donkey. He rests between the boundaries. He saw tranquility that it was good, and the land that it was pleasant. So here you have Yisachar. He is a very strong entity, right? A strong-boned donkey. He's strong. He saw tranquility, right? He sees peace tranquility, and he sees that it's good, and he sees that land is nice. So what is he saying? Like going on vacation, right? That's what he's saying. Going on vacation, tranquility, sitting at the beach with a drink in your hand, reading a magazine, that's tranquil. So Yisachar sees tranquility. He sees life. You know what I would like out of life? I like to be able to work and work and work, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to sit on a beach. I'm going to have a room and a magazine, and I'm just going to take it easy. That's like the best I can do. That's real pleasure. Yisachar saw this, right? Yet he bent his shoulder to bear, and he became an indentured laborer. But what does he do? He works hard. It's like you say to me, oh, there's nothing better in the world than a vacation on the beach. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work every day of the year. Well, that's absurd. You just told me that the best thing you can have is a vacation on the beach. How are you going to work every day of the year? You can't go to the beach. Tell me you're going to work 50 weeks a year, and then the rest of the time you go to the beach. But you're telling me, because I see that the world is a beautiful place to rest and take it easy and sit on the beach, I'm going to go work every day. It doesn't make sense. The statement doesn't make sense. Yisachar saw this, and then he went to work. So it's really the same thing we said earlier. Yisachar understood that true tranquility, true peace, does not come from just sitting at the beach and taking it easy. There's a need for that in everyone's life, to do that. But life is to accomplish. So Yisachar saw that tranquility is good. So what does he do? He goes to work. Because working, the most tranquility, the most peace that you'll get in your life is to look back on your accomplishments when you did something good and you accomplish something. That's why when our children have milestones, they finish in kindergarten, they finish in first grade, they finish day school, they have bar mitzvah, whatever it is. Why do we feel so good about it? Because we put work into these kids. We did a lot of effort to bring them to this point, and now they're at that point. We feel good. That feeling is the feeling that it's talking about here. It's not talking about the feeling you get from taking it easy. It's the feeling that you get from working hard and accomplishing something and looking back at what you did. That's what he means. That's why it says that he saw the tranquility, so he went to work, because he wanted that. How do you get that? By doing things. If you have a child and you don't take care of that child, the child will grow up as a dummy. Like I just read a study they did, I don't know if it's true, but it makes sense, that a baby within the first two months of its life, if you don't interact with that baby and talk, it will grow up emotionally stunted. And there's nothing you can do to change it. It just happens because in the first 2 months of its life, the interactions you have with the baby, the talking and the attention you give it changes that baby's personality. It's the start of its personality. That's how you can see some babies cry, some laugh, some are easygoing, some are not. And you start interacting with them, and they start learning very, very quickly, and they base their whole personality on your interactions. If you don't interact with them, you just put them in a hospital and they stay there, there's going to be something wrong with them. Right? Why? Because the desire of a parent to work on that child, right, is necessary for that child. That child will grow and become something, and now you will feel an accomplishment. It's not from taking it easy, it's from working. That's what we see there. I'll just do one more. Dan will avenge his people. The tribes of Israel will be united as one. It's verse 16 on 279. Dan will be a serpent on the highway, a viper by the path that bites a horse's heels, so its rider falls back. For your salvation do I long, O Hashem. So this is also a funny one. So this is actually Dan. Dan is one of the tribes. But when Yaakov says this, he's prophesizing the future, because there was a great person who came from Dan. That was Samson. And Samson was Mashiach. He was the Mashiach. But he failed. He didn't accomplish what he was supposed to, and we have to now wait for the Mashiach to come back. But it says here that Shimshon is like a viper, Dan is like a viper by the path who bites the horse's heel. Right? A horse is this big giant animal, comes riding by, a little snake is on the side of the road, bites the horse in the heel and kills the horse. How's this big giant horse, right, who could kill 1,000,000 snakes, right? A little snake bites him and he dies. He says that's like done. The Romans are going to come, the Philistines are going to come, all of these people are going to come to attack the Jews, and you're just going to have a little tiny thing. The Jewish people aren't very big. You'll bite them, and ultimately you'll win. All right, but you failed. Samson failed. He did not do what he's supposed to do and become Mashiach. So he finishes the sentence, for your salvation do I long, O Hashem. Remember I told you in the beginning, he says, I'm going to tell you when Mashiach is coming, and then he doesn't tell us. Right here is why. For your salvation do I long. In other words, the Mashiach was supposed to come, Dan's son Shimshon was Mashiach. And he failed. And Yaakov says, God, I have to wait for you now. You're going to have to show us the salvation. Because I thought it was Shimshon, I thought it was Samson, and I see in my prophecy that he's going to fail. So, God, you have to tell us when Mashiach is coming. And he doesn't tell them. He doesn't give them the answer. Because it was supposed to be Shimshon, and he fails. And if you read the story of Shimshon, you'll actually see how it happens. That he's supposed to be a Nazirite his whole life, and then he marries a Philistine woman, and she leads him astray, and she takes away in being a Nazirite, he can't cut his hair, and she cuts his hair, and it destroys him. He ends up dying. But he was supposed to bring the world to perfection, and he failed. So that's where it is. All right, I guess we'll stop with that. We start Parsha Shmos next week, a new book.